So I'm James Heiss. I'm Senior Director of Global Business Development for Appnovation. So I run all of our alliances and partnerships and do some emceeing of events from time to time as well. Just wanted to welcome you guys here. So this is our first sort of full day conference. We've run lots and lots of breakfast events all over the world, but this is the first time we're going to run a full day event today. So we're really excited to have everybody. Wanted to thank all of our sponsors for sponsoring our event. Looking forward to hopefully some good content today from sponsors and speakers as well. So it should be some good panels coming up. So the goal of this conference, we focus Appnovation. We're a services company, and we focus on doing services around open technology. So lots of these technologies you see on the screen here for our sponsors. It's going to be really good. We're going to have some good conversations about that today, and we have some great companies here like Cisco and Salesforce and Sutter Health and Linux Foundation and 1-800-GOT-JUNK. O2E Brands is the actual name of them, or they have some other brands. So should be a really good presentation today. We also have some really good keynotes coming up. So we're going to start with Appnovation's CEO Arnold Leung. So he's going to come up here and talk about some digital transformation stuff, and then after that we'll have some other great speakers as well. So all right.
So I want to start by introducing who we are. I'm the CEO of Appnovation Technologies. I started the company about 8 years ago. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to talk about my experience of how we started as a company 8 years ago, how we went from being a development company to more like a transformational strategy and also application development shop, and also what we have seen so far with customers and how things have changed in the past 8 years with the digital environment out there. So let me start by asking the question, what's the point? So why are we talking about digital transformation here? What happened is that 8 years ago when I started this company, it was primarily about building websites for our customers. When we started, there was a huge market out there for websites. A lot of companies were still moving from traditional commerce to e-commerce. A lot of companies were still big on the idea of community. So these are concepts that's no longer really major these days because most companies do already have a Facebook strategy. They already have a Twitter strategy. But that wasn't the case 8 years ago. And that's when Appnovation started. And also the whole apps ecosystem was not there back then. Back then, phones were still used just for dialing and just for checking web pages using your web browser. There weren't Apple was not as popular as nowadays, and Android was definitely not there yet. But things have changed quite a bit. And also when I was starting the business, it was open source focused because that's when we recognized there was a massive need in the marketplace. At that time, Whitehouse.gov was moving from an enterprise system to Drupal, open source CMS. Back then, open source was not totally enterprise yet. Open source was still a cowboy approach to a lot of solutions. Things have changed quite a bit over the years in that open source is becoming the norm. And we're seeing that with more and more governments, especially in the US and Europe. But that's what we saw back then. It was when we started this company, it was a focus on how can we help organizations use open source technologies to power their websites, to power their apps, to power their ecosystem. But nowadays, that's changing quite a bit because open source is becoming more of the norm. Is no longer a major selling point for us. What the selling point nowadays is about how can we help organizations get their systems up from where it was about 10 years ago to where it is nowadays that needs to be fully integrated, fully connected. So let me go into the details of it. Let me start by talking about open source versus open technology. So open source is the term that I guess a lot of us would probably know about all the way with the history, all the way starting from Linux. When Linux was created about 20, 30 years ago, it was the first open source system. It was about enabling developers to build on a platform, enabling developers to change whatever they want to change, enabling people to use technology for free, totally free. Not a single dime needs to be paid. But that's been changing in the last 8 years. A lot of open source companies are becoming commercially supported. Linux, for example, Red Hat started a new product and offering in which they provided support for Linux. That was the beginning of what we call open technology. So these are systems that are not the open source way in the sense that it wasn't totally free, but then it's fully commercially supported, and that's what enterprises need. Because what's been recognized out there is companies need systems that they can easily modify, easily change, easily maintain without lock-in. But at the same time, they also need the ability to get support. They want to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey guys, something's wrong. Can you please fix this for me? So that's the change between open source to open technology. So open technology, again, is still fairly open. You can still easily modify things. But at the same time, there's enterprise support. There's always somebody out there to make it happen for you. So why is open tech becoming the norm? What we saw the last few years was the emergence of commercially supported open technologies, like the Acquias, like the Alfrescos out there, where the technology is easily integratable with other systems, easily modifiable, and easily maintainable. But at the same time, companies do pay for support and make sure that things are functioning, and there is always a company behind that piece of software. The other thing is that as open technologies become the norm, it is about integration. So what we see out there is a lot of companies nowadays, they need their systems to work with other technologies. A lot of them can be fairly legacy, can be from 30 or 40 years ago. Our customers, such as Pfizer, such as the Cisco's out there, they have legacy systems from all the way back from 20, 30 years. What they need to do nowadays is they want to integrate everything together into one piece. And what they realize is that by using open technology, they can make the integration fairly easy because there's no proprietary protocols between different systems. You can easily modify things, you can easily connect things, and there's always a documentation about what's the best way of doing it. And that's why we see open tech becoming the norm these days. So next, I want to talk about how can digital transformation affect your business. To do this, I'm going to talk about a few areas, starting with customers and the partner ecosystem, and also the suppliers. Customers nowadays are becoming more digital. So for example, when I was flying here. Nowadays in Air Canada, you can actually look at the videos and all the entertainment content using your own tablet and your laptop. That's something that was not available about 4 or 5 years ago. And that is changing because the customers of Air Canada, like people like us, we all have our own laptops, we all have our own smartphones and also tablets. They're fully connected. That's what I mean by customers are going digital. Everybody has multiple devices. It is definitely a need nowadays to connect with these customers using different platforms and channels. And that's something that most major enterprises need to look into. For example, Netflix, about 10, 20 years ago, people would never imagine that you can actually watch digital content on your Apple TV at your house without having to go to a theater. But nowadays, that's how most people do it. Same for Uber. 10 years ago, people would never imagine that you can hail a cab or call and find a taxi without calling somebody or without waving your hand at the street. But nowadays, that's how you would find the most effective way of getting around the city. So the concept here is that our customers are becoming more digital focused. They have different devices, and if we do not focus on connecting with them using different channels, we'll be losing out on the next step of this evolution. The next thing is about the channel. So this is a big part of this is related to e-commerce. About 72% of U.S. adults now uses e-banking. So that's something that's really significant because digital channels are fairly different than physical channels. So a person going to an ATM machine, a person going to an actual branch, is fairly different than a person being engaged via their tablet or their computer, because there are just so many more variables and so many more things you can present to them while the person is using the digital devices. And that's something that's been changing in the past years. And companies a lot of progressive companies and banks are trying to find ways to even better engage their audiences in ways that's not possible before. And also, 26% of IT budget decision makers globally nowadays see digital channels as the key and are investing heavily into making their platforms work for this new generation of buyers and consumers. And thirdly is about the competition. I mentioned Netflix and Uber earlier, but these are two real competitors for the taxi industry and also the movie industry, and that's really changing the way it works. So what I want to conclude here is that the digital revolution is definitely happening, and if we don't focus on how we can better serve our customers and suppliers, and also the other partners in the ecosystem using digital channels, we'll be missing out quite a bit as the revolution continues. So now I ask the question, what is your company doing to combat the digital disruption? Because no business is immune to this change. The taxi industry thought that they would be safe from it 5-6 years ago, and that's not happening. Blockbuster, before they went out of business, thought they would be able to fight against Netflix fairly well, but also that did not happen. So we need to be aware of all the disruptions that are happening. And a lot of the disruption doesn't happen within big companies. A lot of this innovation comes from smaller companies. They're changing the environment, changing the landscape. And a lot of big companies need to be aware of that and be prepared and know about these things that are happening. So a lot of executives actually are in doubt that their companies are fully ready for the digital revolution. In fact, only about 21% believes that their CEO has set a clear strategy of what the digital roadmap is going to be, and only 15% believe that their organization has the right skill set and the people that's needed for the digital revolution. And that's fairly concerning for most enterprises and organizations and even governments, because everybody knows that this is happening, but the skill set out there is fairly lacking. And it's actually, I was in China a few weeks ago. The situation there is that North America is already ahead of the game here, and even though only 21% of people believes that they have the right strategy in place, North America is already way ahead of the game compared to Europe and the Asia Pac. And what we're seeing is that there's even bigger lack of skill set in those regions. And those regions definitely need even more help to drive these changes to happen. So now I want to talk about the core concepts of digital transformation, what it really is, and how it breaks down to different components. The first one I'm going to talk about is open integration. It is a concept that nowadays we have so many different devices, so many different platforms. All these different devices needs to connect with each other. At our house, we got cars, we got TVs, we got everything else. There's a concept called the Internet of Things, which is how can we have everything connected with one another, enabling a really good user experience and good control of the situation. And also the other part of that is having unified user profiles and user systems so that all the data is stored in one place. This is a core part of the transformation because back in the days, IT is fairly siloed. And having a unified system, single data points, is fairly key to having a better user experience. How can we know our customers better? How can we sell to the customers the right products and services? The only way of doing that is by having concentrated and unified data. Second major change here is what I call invest in innovation. This is a concept of buying off the shelf of what's out there, what's best of breed, and just investing in integrating technologies and also investing in things that are unique to your business. A lot of cloud-based services, like for CRM, is Salesforce.com. So these are services that's been used out there for ages, and these are services that's used by most major organizations out there. There's definitely no longer a point to make everything yourself. I remember about 20 years ago, companies were still making their own CRM, but nowadays that's not the right thing to do because there are just much better systems out there to make it happen. No need to reinvent the wheel. Is more cost effective to be done that way. Thirdly, is about powering applications on the cloud. On-prem, we believe, is something that's fading away because other than fairly highly confidential systems that's used by governments. Because even companies like Amazon and Google out there, they're building systems that's highly scalable and highly secured. The chance of them building the chance of any company building a more secure system, more scalable system than them is actually fairly slim. The reason being that the resource they put into these systems, even for themselves, is fairly massive. So we believe that the cloud transformation is going to continue happening for the next coming years. Fourthly is open collaboration. So the digital transformation is also bringing a change to how we build software. Back in the days, we used to build software using the waterfall method. It used to be fairly closed. Each developer have certain tasks they got to focus on, and they follow the steps, and things get done. What was realized in the last few years, and that's partly related to the whole open software situation, is that we found that developers are more effective by working together as a team, by collaborating openly. This is where things like GitHub comes in, where programmers can work with their teammates in a unified environment to create a piece of software. In a way we call open collaboration. So it's about the teamwork and the efficiency that brings about better software, more secure software, more scalable software. And also the idea of community is also massive here. Community allows for peer evaluation, peer reviews of software. And through this process, what we found is that the software actually gets done much better and much quicker than what would be done by one person themselves. But together with the excitement of digital transformation also comes a number of challenges. Looking at a report from Forrester, the digital business mindset is fairly different than what it was back in the days. What they call digital touchpoints are different ways of reaching customers, and Forrester actually wrote in the term "bolt on" as of how things were back in the days, which is basically companies would focus on the core of their business. Say, for example, they have a teller at the bank, but they would just bolt on extra devices onto it, as opposed to seeing these new devices as strategic to their business. That's a big change in the mentality behind it. Secondly, is about organizational environment and also the attitude towards technology. Back in the days, technology was about cost cutting. How do they make things faster, easier, and cheaper? But nowadays, technology is more strategic to any business. Is about how can they drive innovation, how can they drive more competitiveness from the technology, not just about saving costs. So IT is not just a cost-cutting measure, but more like a innovation to drive more business. That's a big mindset change also that we're seeing in organizations. One of the challenges is the globalization of data. So nowadays, as we get more and more touch points with our consumers and having consumers within different geos, we will have data sitting in different places. But that comes with a challenge of there are a lot of government regulations, a lot of compliance rules against where data needs to be. For example, you collected some data in China. Can that data really sit in Chinese servers, or can they sit in American servers? U.S. customer data, can they sit in the European servers, or do they have to be American servers? So these are things that we always got to think about, because data is no longer within a silo. Things are always connected with each other. Things are always transferred from one place to the other. How can we make sure we're compliant with the rules and regulations out there, especially for public companies, is definitely something challenging to see. Second thing is about security. With so many different systems that are connected to each other, with so many different systems that run off the cloud-based servers, how can we make sure that we're safe with these systems? Like I said earlier, though, cloud-based providers are definitely typically more secure than in-house servers nowadays because of the investment they put into security. But that remains a concern when data is being transferred from one place to the other, because the fact of the matter is there's just so many different touch points nowadays. There's about maybe 100 phones here. There's 100 different ways a hacker can get into one single system. So the data security is definitely fairly key to success of a digital transformation strategy nowadays. finally is about how can we make it easy for your customers to access that data? We have so many different touch points. We got your Android phones, we got your iPhones, we got your iPads, we got your PCs, we got your TV, your smart TVs. How can we how can we ensure that your customers can easily access that data is becoming more challenging. But the key to this is nowadays there's really great HTML5 technologies that allows for different platforms to be, that allows for the optimized display of data within different platforms, and that's definitely making the case for much more easier adoption of different technologies, and enables the launching of different new apps much quicker and better than before. And also there's also the concept of security versus access. The more secure the system is, the less access there is, because frankly, the most secure way of storing your data is not connect that piece of data to the internet. But that's not something we can easily do nowadays with connected devices. But that's something that CIOs and CTOs always got to think about, is how can we balance the difference between the two areas of security and access. It's always about finding the middle ground, because focusing too far on one end will be a disastrous decision for most enterprises these days. In terms of benefits of the digital transformation areas, I want to focus on two things. One area is the concept of big data. With the amount of data out there that is being stored into different systems, the amount of analysis that can be done on these systems, the kind of insights that we can do from them is pretty amazing. For example, I mentioned the situation of airplanes earlier, where you can now watch different videos and different movies on your tablets, on your laptops when you're flying on the plane. It's much easier for the airlines to collect data on you as a passenger about what your interest is. Are you interested in adventure movies, or are you more interested in shopping for clothes on these devices? But that's the kind of data that would drive more business for the airlines. And this is the kind of data that's interesting for both the airlines and also the some of their providers and vendors, like credit card companies. The key here is we need to utilize this data. We need to make sure that they're secure and safe. But at the same time, we must leverage that data for making better business decisions, obviously in compliance with privacy rules. But that's the amount of data that's out there that can really help drive business innovation and success down the road. And that's the major change we're seeing these days.